In this video, we're going to talk about more complex types than we've looked at so far. We're going to start looking at arrays in Java. And arrays in Java are a beautiful thing compared to other languages. But first, let's just understand what we mean when we're talking about an array. We take our basic integer type, so I've got it displayed on the top here, int x is equal to 6. And our x is going to represent or name a memory location. And in that memory location, we're going to store 6. And so this is our primitive type int that we're looking at. Now, if you had an array of integers, then you would have something that looks more like this second part of the slide, where you have consecutive storage locations in memory, and each one can hold its own integer value. So again, this is going to be named x, but there's going to be 10 different values associated with it because we're specifying 10 within the square brackets. That's telling the compiler, I want 10 of these. Again, named x. And with our assignment operator, we're going to set all of the values in this array to 6. So let's look at this in our Java code. I'm going to create a public class called arrays. And in our main, we're going to declare and define a new integer array. So to do that, we specify our type, so it's int with the square brackets, int array equals new integer type, and then another set of square brackets where we're going to place the number of elements we want. We'll talk about new more later on, but the new operator is telling the compiler that we want to use more memory. It's telling the compiler that go ahead and set this memory aside for us so we can use it in whatever way we're describing. So I have a couple of print lines here. One's just printing, if you were just to print the array, what would you get? If you're going to print, Java has some very nice features built into arrays which you don't get in other languages like C and C++, where you can call the length of the array as a property of it, and you get the length back. And then the final print statement here is just going to print a random element out of the array, the in this case, the 10th element. Oh, something else I should have mentioned earlier, if we go back to our slides. We are always going to index our arrays starting at 0. This probably seems a little counterintuitive. You would expect it to start at 1 because that's the first element. But in Java and C++ and Python and many other languages, it starts at 0. So your 0th element is really the first element. And so in this case, your 10th element is actually going to be indexed with 9. Okay, so we're going to comment out this part of the code for now because I don't want to get it confused. And we have our declarations here for our array, and then printing out just kind of a few things in the array. So if we compile and run, all right, what do we see? Well, this first print statement kind of just prints this jumbled up number. And that's actually the reference to the array. So you're sort of seeing where the Java virtual machine is actually putting this array in its system, if you will. Don't worry too much about this, but I just wanted to show this to you because if you tried to, if you print out just an int by itself, you're going to get the value of the int, the value that's stored in that int. If you print out the name of an array, you actually get the storage location of that array. The next line we print out is the length. And you can see that it says 20, which is great because that matches up the 20 we put in the square brackets when we were declaring the size. And then this last statement, we're printing the 9th element, or actually it'll be the 10th value. And we get a 0. And here's another really nice property about arrays in Java. When you allocate an array, and we call that new function, new operator, it's going to initialize all of the values in your array to 0. This does not happen in other languages like C and C++. In some of those languages, it's completely random. You get whatever is in memory. But in Java, since we're working with this nice virtual environment, they set everything to 0 when you initialize things. Okay, so let us talk a little bit more about using arrays. Now here we have the for loop that we learned about last module. And we have, it's our very standard format. We initialize our variable to 0. We then have our expression that's going to evaluate if we should continue with the loop. And so while our count variable is less than the length of the array, we're going to increment count. And so what that's going to do in this loop is for every element, we're going to set it equal to count. And that will give us pretty much, we're going to be storing the index of our array as the value of the array as well. So now to see what we've stored in our array, we're going to go ahead and print it out. And we're going to use our enhanced for loop to do that. So with that, we declare an integer element. So just another integer, name it something. And then we're going to tell the compiler that we want to pull all of the elements out of the int array. So every time we go through the loop, we're going to print out a new element, and it's going to give them to us sequentially, starting at index 0 and going to the end. Okay, so let's try printing all of this out. And as you can see, we get our numbers from 0 all the way to 19, because we have 20 elements, and like I said before, we always start with an index of 0. So your last element is going to be the number of elements minus 1. And then just for fun, I printed out a single element. So if you want to access a single element, you just use the square brackets again, and then you use the index of the element you want. In this case, 9, which is going to print out 9. All right, I hope that was a good overview. Have fun with this module.